Taiwan, baby.
Taiwan.
To this day.
To this day. To this day.
To this day.
We're covering today's top boxing news.
In the heavyweight division, there is something of a triangle of champions. This will not be resolved until everyone fights everyone, but if this fight goes the way you just described and Fury is victorious, you being his manager, promoter, or his promoter, would you want him to then unify and become undisputed against Anthony Joshua? Was that the best next fight for him?
No, because Anthony Joshua is not an elite fighter. And by the time Fury is ready, just remember there'll probably be a third fight with Wilder. But by the time Fury is ready for that fight, I promise you Joshua won't be the heavyweight champion with those three belts, because Joshua is not an elite fighter. Any fighter that gets beat by an average heavyweight like Andy Ruiz and gets knocked out by Ruiz cannot be considered elite. And then to get Andy Ruiz in the second fight, where Andy Ruiz comes in obese and still not be able to do anything but run around the ring and win with your jab, he is not elite. Kubrat Pulev, who will be fighting Joshua and is my fighter, along with Epic Sports, will go over to London, and I guarantee you will knock Joshua out. I don't think he beats Dylan White. I'll tell you the truth. I don't think he beats Dylan White now. I don't think he's an elite heavyweight. I really don't believe that. I think Al's guy, the big Polish guy, Kownacki is his name, I think he's better. I think Big Baby Miller is better. I know Kubrat Pulev is better. And I think even Usyk, who's coming up from the cruiserweight ranks, is better.
Do you think it's an ability issue, or is it a mental issue? He's got three belts. What is it about him that keeps him from being elite?
Because he can't take a punch, because he doesn't have the ability that these other guys have. The English guy that Frank Warren has, Dubois, is a better fighter than Joshua. Joshua has been built up. He beat an over-the-hill Klitschko. He really demonstrated, and I saw him fight Parker. And goddamn, Parker is an elite. And, he's on the same level as Andy Ruiz. And Joshua couldn't do anything with Parker. Yeah, he won a decision, but what does that say?
There's a reason you keep seeing more and more of Bob Arum diminishing Anthony Joshua, tearing him down and whatever he's accomplished. He's very dismissive of him as a fighter because, at least according to Bob, Anthony Joshua is not an elite level guy. Elite level guys don't get stopped, don't get dropped by average heavyweights like Andy Ruiz. That's according to Bob.
He said it.
You can agree with it, you can disagree with it. But as far as what Bob's saying, that's what Bob is saying.
He said it.
That an elite level heavyweight don't lose to the likes of an Andy Ruiz.
He said it.
I said this in a previous video. If you see Bob Arum say these very short-sighted things about Anthony Joshua in a sport where most everyone has an off night, I mean, it does happen, Vladimir Klitschko got trounced by Corey Saunders. Lennox Lewis got dropped by Oliver McCall, got stopped by Hasim Rahman.
Did y'all forget?
Even the GOAT, even the great Muhammad Ali lost to a guy with only a handful of fights, and Leon Spinks. I mean, these things happen, they do.
Tyson versus Douglas.
But if you're seeing that Bob is saying what he's saying, it's not for lack of knowledge that, everybody's gotten off night. That's not why he's saying what he's saying. He's got to tear down Anthony Joshua. He's got to try to convince you that that guy is not relevant to the conversation because of what I told you before.
Promoter talk.
Bob is trying to sell you this weekend's fight, and that's not the only fight that he's trying to sell you. This could turn out to be a three-fight engagement. The first fight, which we already saw, this weekend's fight, and what could be a rubber match. He's got to try to convince you that that is what's important in the heavyweight division.
That's all.
That and that alone.
That's it.
So a guy like Anthony Joshua, oh, he's not elite. That guy hasn't beat nobody.
But Jarrell Miller has?
Can't take a punch, he's no good. Bob has got to do this in order to try to get your attention fixed on Wilder versus Fury 2, and what could be Wilder versus Fury 3. It's for this reason that he's saying these things. And I talked about this in a previous video, though we're going to have a little bit more of an extensive conversation in this video. You think about the names that Bob Arum mentioned. The guys who he thinks are better fighters than Anthony Joshua. Adam Kownacki.
Okay, what's his best win?
Adam Kownacki, who fights on the PBC side of things. Who's Adam Kownacki beaten that facilitates him being an elite fighter? Who's he beaten? I mean, I don't know that he will or won't go on to become an elite fighter, per se. I don't know future. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But as it stands here today, Bob thinks Adam is better than Anthony.
Okay.
But what has Adam done that communicates that he's better than Anthony? We know that Adam's not a world champion.
Nor has he ever been.
But okay, you think Adam is a better fighter than Anthony Joshua. So who has Adam beaten so far that facilitates that kind of anecdote? Who has Adam beaten that proves that he's better than Anthony Joshua? Charles Martin?
What?
Is that who?
What?
You know, they both fought Charles Martin. It's just that Anthony Joshua fought him first, beat him first, took his title and took his oath. And where Anthony Joshua dispatched Charles Martin in just 2 rounds, it took Adam 10 rounds and 3 judges to win the fight against Charles Martin. Yet according to Bob, Adam is the better fighter.
Not Anthony.
Or at least better than Anthony Joshua. I mean, these aren't triangle theories, you understand.
They're not.
I'm not telling you that because Anthony Joshua beat Charles Martin in better fashion than Adam did, that Anthony Joshua easily beats Adam Kownacki. No, this is not a triangle theory because these guys have never fought and they're not about to fight. I'm saying that if what Bob Arum is telling you is true, that Anthony Joshua is not an elite level fighter, if he's not, and Adam is, then why did Anthony Joshua beat Charles Martin much easier than Adam did? Charles Martin was able to go the distance with Adam Kownacki, whereas he couldn't make it out of the second round with Anthony Joshua. But Anthony Joshua is not an elite level fighter, at least according to Bob. You think about one of Adam Kownacki's more recent fights, the fight with Chris Arreola.
Yeesh.
The very faded, war-torn Chris Arreola.
38 years old.
He went the distance with Adam Kownacki, too.
12 rounds.
What are you trying to convince me of? That the mark of eliticism for Adam Kownacki is having fighters like Charles Martin and Chris Arreola go the distance with you? Is that the mark of eliticism? Don't misunderstand me. I'm not telling you that Adam Kownacki is a bad fighter. No, sir, he's a good fighter. What I'm telling you is you can't discount, you can't dismiss Anthony Joshua and everything he's done for Adam Kownacki. Because Anthony Joshua has beaten better fighters than Adam Kownacki has. And they have at least one common opponent, and Anthony Joshua looked better against Charles Martin than Adam Kownacki did. So, what's so bad about Anthony Joshua? Bob also mentioned the name of Jarrell Miller. Apparently he thinks Jarrell is better than Anthony Joshua. I'm sure that Bob Arum signing Jarrell Miller to Top Rank has nothing to do with that anecdote. Nothing. Those 2 things got nothing to do with each other. But Jarrell Miller's beaten who that facilitates that anecdote? Who? A very faded Fred Kasi? What? Bogdan Dinu? Part-time fighter. Bogdan Dinu is, in fact, a part-time fighter. He's a member of the Romanian SWAT team in his country, and he moonlights as a boxer. I guess beating Bogdan, the part-time fighter, is better than beating the guys that Anthony Joshua has beat. The full-time fighters. The top 10 fighters. The world champions. Beating Bogdan Dinu is better than that. And that makes Jarrell Miller a better fighter. I don't know who else. The most notoriable name on Jarrell Miller's resume is Gerald Washington.
Him again?
Same as Adam Kownacki. And Gerald, he's beaten virtually no one, but that's according to Bob. This is boxing according to Bob. Or is this just put simply what I told you before? Bob is trying to sell you this fight, so he's got to tear down the other game in town. That's what's happening. That's what's going on. Bob can't have you guys out there thinking that Anthony Joshua is still relevant to the conversation when he's trying to sell you a fight, 2 fights really, with 2 other fighters. It's that much harder to market this fight as this generation's Ali versus Frazier, Ali versus Foreman, when you know that the boxing community at large is clamoring for another fight with another fighter. So what you're gonna do is tear down that other fighter. Try to make it seem like he's not important. I mean, if Arum is everything that Bob says he is, if Arum is supposedly a better fighter than Anthony Joshua, then why did Arum turn down the fight with Anthony Joshua?
Huh?
If Jarrell Miller is a better fighter than Anthony Joshua, then why did Jarrell Miller load his body full of banned substances ahead of a fight with Anthony Joshua? If he's so much of a better fighter, why did he have to turn to 3 separate banned substances to prepare himself for Anthony Joshua if he's so much better? I mean, these are relevant questions based on what Bob is saying. Bob says those guys are better fighters. Are you sure? Bob Arum has gone as far as name-dropping Frank Warren's prospects, at least one of them, as being a better fighter than Anthony Joshua. He mentioned Daniel Dubois, and I don't doubt the potential of Daniel Dubois for a second. I myself feel that this kid, he's got all the ingredients to go on to do great, great things. But as far as what he's done so far, he hasn't done anything great. Most he's done is beaten Nathan Gorman, in all the same ways that Anthony Joshua, when he was coming up, beat Dillian White. Daniel Dubois hasn't beaten any top 10 fighters or world champions or Olympic gold medalists.
Like Joshua has.
So get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here, okay?
Fuck out of
Now he's
here.
backing Kubrat Pulev to beat Anthony Joshua. Kubrat Pulev, who is one of his more recent signings. And he's backing Kubrat to beat Anthony Joshua the same way that he was backing Joseph Parker to beat Anthony Joshua. The tune has changed since then because he doesn't have a very high opinion of Parker these days, though back then he thought Parker had enough to win the fight.
Did y'all forget?
I have no doubts he's going to take a very similar stance if and when Anthony fights Kubrat. And I'm backing Anthony to not only beat Kubrat, but knock him out. That's what I think is going to happen in that fight. That's how I think that's going to work out. Anthony Joshua is going to go in there and likely go back to being a knockout artist. And if and when he does, Bob Arum is going to take the same stance when it comes to Pulev that he took with Parker.
And I saw him fight Parker, and goddamn, Parker is an elite. And, you know, he's on the same level as Andy Ruiz.
He'll be saying the same thing about Pulev shortly. You'll see. It's promoted talk, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it is. It's promoted talk. And it's up to you, the listener, to be able to distinguish the bullshit from the real shit. Every so often, Bob Arum, like many characters in the sport of boxing, they'll give you an insight into what's really going on. They will, every so often. But other times, they're just doing their jobs. They're doing what promoters do, promoting a fight. So in order for Bob to promote this weekend's fight, and what could be the third installment of that fight, he's got to tear down Anthony Joshua because he can't have the boxing community at large clamoring for Anthony Joshua to fight either one of these two guys while they're supposed to be fighting each other. It makes their fight seem like small potatoes, a prelude, an intro to what would be a bigger fight.
A Joshua fight.
It's not a good look. Tyson Fury goes in there against guys like Tom Schwartz, Otto Wallin, and I guess this is supposed to be better than going in there against guys like Alexander Povetkin, a top 10 fighter, an Olympic gold medalist, something that neither of those two guys are. Goes in there against guys like Joseph Parker, an unbeaten champion at the time. Yeah, Joshua didn't knock him out, but when you're fighting good fighters, the knockouts aren't always easy to get. Ask Deontay Wilder.
The first of fight.
Couldn't keep Tyson Fury down, could
Not
he?
last time.
We'll see if he has more luck this weekend. We'll see if things work out in the second fight the way they did not in the first. I don't know. It's anybody's guess. But yeah, Tyson Fury is elite level, and I don't doubt that he is. I'm just saying that Tyson Fury, like Anthony Joshua, isn't always going to look perfect, and sometimes you might lose a fight. You might. But if we're looking at consistency, if we're looking at who's faced more world champions and who's faced more top 10 fighters, overall, who's been consistently squaring off against a better quality of opposition, the answer is simple. The answer is Anthony Joshua. Because neither Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder, the two fighters that are fighting this weekend, neither one of those two guys have faced more top 10 fighters and world champions than Anthony Joshua has. It's a simple matter of fact. So when you got one guy who's consistently fighting live animals and formidable fighters on a regular basis, the probability of that guy losing a fight is much higher than it is for two guys who are constantly on easy street. I mean, what are you telling me, that Tom Schwartz was a credible threat? Or that Otto Wallin was a credible threat? What are you telling me? That Brazil was a live animal ahead of the Wilder fight? Everybody knew he was a sitting duck. Everybody knew this guy, he's gonna get himself knocked out because he ain't got the ingredients for this fight. Everyone knew that. What? A recycled fight in Luis Ortiz, who was older, slower, and less formidable in the second fight than he was in the first? We saw what happened in the first fight, so that's an insight into the second. And that's why they decided to fight that guy again instead of somebody else?
Pretty obvious.
Well, you got Joshua. This guy's keeping busy with top 10 fighter after top 10 fighter. In case you're not aware, Andy Ruiz becoming a unified champion not only made him a champion, but a top 10 fighter. Joshua beat that guy in one-sided fashion. Now, what's he about to do? He's about to fight yet another top 10 fighter in Kubrat Pulev. What's that? The 7th, the 8th top 10 fighter that Anthony Joshua will have fought. The 7th or the 8th top 10 fighter that he will have fought, having debuted years after Deontay Wilder. Years after Tyson Fury. And yet Anthony Joshua has fought more top 10 fighters and world champions than they have. I'm gonna tell you something. It's not Anthony Joshua's amateur background, not just that is the year mark for elitism. You know, him winning that gold medal, because you could win a gold medal and still end up like Audley Harrison. So it's not just that. It's that as a professional, he's beaten 2 gold medalists, just like himself. 1 in Vladimir Klitschko, 2 in Alexander Povetkin. It's that very early in Anthony Joshua's career, he started taking risks and came out on top. So much so that he unified world titles. Where most other guys would have still been behind the safety and confines of the bring-along process, Anthony Joshua started taking on top 10 fighters and world champions.
And beat them.
So if you're seeing Bob Arum saying what he's saying, it's because 1, he's got to try to sell you this weekend's fight and what could be a 3rd installment of it, and 2,
He's frustrated.
frustration. Okay? You can't have your way with Anthony Joshua because no other heavyweight out there is on equal footing with him when it comes to revenue, when it comes to earning power. That this guy, he doesn't actually need Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder to bring in big paydays, whereas you guys had to let your powers combine, put this situation together, and you got 4 or 5 or 6 different entities trying to split the pie. Even if this weekend's fight does 600,000 pay-per-view buys domestically here in America, that's still a pie that you gotta split between a lot of people. Think about it. You've got 2 major American broadcast networks and Fox and ESPN to deal with. You've got the PBC, you've got Top Rank, you've got the 2 fighters, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. So even if the pay-per-view buys are as generous, not saying that they will be, but even if they were as generous as 600,000 pay-per-view buys, you're still not making the kind of profit that Anthony Joshua makes all on his own. This guy by himself got $85 million. For fighting who? Andy Ruiz? This is frustrating for Bob. This is frustrating for the people over there at the PBC because you can't have your way with this guy. You just don't have the leverage. So the best thing you can try to do is convince people that he's not as good as they say he is. But the facts themselves, they're not doing you any favors. That's the real reason we see Bob saying the things that he's saying. He's frustrated.